What if Luffy wasn't the only captain to get his crew to Laugh Tale before the end of the story? And I'm not just talking one other crew.
Not one, championships.
Not two.
LeBron, tell us about that.
Not two, not three.
I'm talking all 4 of the current Yonko. And I think the only way that that can really happen is if they are all there at the same exact time. We only have so many years left in the story, and we still have 4 very powerful crews left that are each led by individuals who have all had some very strong foreshadowing for them to make it to that final island on their own. But how that all unfolds is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. But before we get any further, please make sure to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. I've been putting in a lot of work behind the scenes the last few weeks so I can start bringing you all sorts of new content like live streams and even some collabs with other One Piece YouTubers, so please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on anything that I drop in the future. Plus it doesn't even cost you anything, you know, so you know what I'm saying. But on to the theory.
Yeah.
I want to start off by quickly running through the hints that show why each of these captains will make it to Laugh Tale at some point, and also why they're very likely to be there at the same exact time. And I'm going to start off with Luffy because I think it's safe to assume that we all know why he's going to be there. So let's move on to Shanks, and he just told us in chapter 1054 that it's time for him and Beckman to go claim the One Piece. He also said that he hasn't been to Wano since they dropped off Odin, so I think it's very possible that he got the final poneglyph rubbing while the raid was going on, and that's why he was able to go claim it now and he couldn't do it any other time over the last 20 years. I mean, he snuck into Marijois just fine, so getting into and out of the capital wouldn't be that big of a problem, I don't think. And since he decided to not meet up with Luffy just yet at Wano, I think Laugh Tale is the most likely place for that reunion to finally happen. But we also know that Shanks and Buggy made a promise as kids to make it there on their own with their own crews. So Buggy will have to find a way there as well, and given that he is now the head of the Cross Guild with all these other powerful pirates, I don't think it's that crazy that he could also find a way there as well. And I talked about why Blackbeard is going to make it there just a few videos ago, but the biggest reason is just his parallel with Luffy, and the fact that he also wants to be the Pirate King, and he's had that planned out from the very beginning. In order to do that, he will also have to make it to Laugh Tale, where he probably fights Luffy for the title. And after the events of chapter 1059, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Kobe ends up being leveraged by some pirate group to get poneglyph rubbings from the Straw Hats. Either Blackbeard could do so, since he obviously has Kobe as we speak, or perhaps the Cross Guild does so if Blackbeard decides to trade Kobe in for a bounty, and then the Cross Guild finds out their connection and calls up the Straw Hats. This could even trigger a potential Davey Back fight that I'm going to discuss later on. And they all need to get there at the same time, because if Blackbeard or Nami or Buggy or Croc made their way there first, they would probably just take all the treasure and maybe even reveal some of the secrets to the world. So for that reason, I think that all 4 have to get to Laugh Tale, or at least right outside of it, at the same time. Or if not, it would have to be in some reasonable order. For example, Shanks could get there first, and then Luffy arrives so we get that reunion, and then Buggy arrives for yet another reunion, and then Blackbeard comes in and starts the conflict. I mean, if Oda is really going to wrap the story up in the next few years, this situation feels like an extremely plausible way to properly pay off some of these major lingering plot lines in quick succession and in a way that makes sense. So, if these 4 Yonko do actually make it to Laugh Tale at the same time, then obviously we have to discuss on how that would go down. I mean, how would 4 Yonko crews determine who's going to become the king of the pirates? I mean, they could just have a free-for-all, maybe something like we saw at Marineford, but that would cause another huge problem, which is that everything around them would get destroyed. While we don't know that much about Laugh Tale or how to get there, we can see from Roger's flashback that it is indeed an island. Now, maybe that island is inside of a whale or inside of the Red Line or something like that, but it's still an island. And if 4 Yonko crews decided to go all out, I don't see how the island or the treasure would make it out unscathed. I mean, Zoro vs Mihawk, Shanks vs Blackbeard, Crocodile doing his thing, Luffy using his awakening, maybe Moria and maybe even Aokiji are doing stuff for Blackbeard's crew, etc, etc. All in one area. I mean, just think about that. If Marineford was as crazy as it was, and Punk Hazard looks like it does after Akainu and Aokiji fought, I think it's safe to say that all 4 of these Yonko together would probably just destroy Laugh Tale if they were close by. So I think it's likely that they will agree to settle the dispute another way, like the old classic pirate way, with a Davey Back fight.
Stop right there! Stop! No, stop! Stop right there!
This will limit the destruction that they cause and simultaneously allow the true best pirate crew to claim the prize by having them compete in serious pirate competitions. And I don't mean like what we saw with the Foxy Pirates. You should think of that like the Fry Cook Games, and think of Laugh Tale like the actual Olympics.
That's what you think, but it's not over yet!
It's not over yet!
But before we dive into the Davey Back Fight themselves, I want to show you guys some insane parallels that I found between Long Ring Longland and Laugh Tale. And the reason I'm bringing all these parallels up is because Long Ring Longland is where we were first introduced to Davey Back Fights, even if the fight we saw was kind of a joke. And these very strong connections to Laugh Tale make me think that we could also see Davey Backs occur there as well. But this time it will be much more serious than the first time around. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if Davey Back Fights is how Rox got all of his crew members, meaning that he wasn't just strong but also very cunning, but I'll discuss that in a totally different video. And the first big hint occurs in chapter 304. After escaping the sea monkeys, Usopp famously comes down with "I can't go to that island" disease when Robin spots Long Ring Longland. Buggy also had this disease right before the Roger Pirates got to Laugh Tale. Could that mean that Usopp isn't that far from Laugh Tale either? Well, let's just hold that thought for now. But this is our first parallel between the two islands. And then our next bit of evidence is Long Ring Longland itself. At first it seems like an empty plain, but they quickly realize that everything and everybody is stretched out, much like Luffy is able to do. And now that we know that the Gomu Gomu Awakening allows Luffy to stretch other things and even other people, this island is probably a lot more peculiar than you thought the first time around. We know that Joy Boy is the one who left his treasure at Laugh Tale, and he's also the last one to awaken that fruit, so this is yet another potential parallel between these two islands. I mean, when they ask the old man about it, he says that everyone that lives here feels free, so they can grow taller and longer than normal, which is an obvious parallel to Luffy's fruit being so free and causing the drums of liberation. He is all about being free, and apparently that feeling even allows this island to stretch as well. Maybe Joy Boy had a permanent effect on this island, or maybe he's just from here. And the last potential connection that I want to bring up for now is the log pose. We learn that since the island is actually 10 points around a circle that form a crown, it's all one position on the log pose. So eternal poses, which apparently they do have there, don't really help you navigate point to point around the island, which makes it very hard for the villagers to sail around and catch up if they do fall behind. This should also mean that if you have a normal log pose, it would treat every single point the exact same. So regardless of which of the 10 points you land on, it would point you to the next completely separate island and not another point. This means that it would be very difficult for anyone to sail around and see more than one point of Long Ring Longland at a time, since the pose is going to direct you away after the very first one you land on, meaning that an average of 90% of it is concealed from the world by default, since everyone would only get to see one point each, which kind of reminds me of Laugh Tale in a way, since it's an island that has apparently been hidden from everyone for almost 800 years. And when you add in the fact that each point is just an empty plain with nothing on it, and only Luffy was excited to go see it, that also adds to the mystique in my opinion. Maybe showing that only those with a childlike imagination would even be interested in investigating it in the first place. And there's actually even more parallels between Long Ring Longland and Laugh Tale that potentially reveal where the final island is, and why you need all 4 poneglyphs to find it, but I'm saving that for my next video, so you should definitely make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out when I drop that one. But Long Ring Longland famously ends with a Davey Back fight against the Foxy Pirates, and that made me wonder if it's not out of the question that we see yet another parallel between these two islands, meaning that we also have Laugh Tale be resolved by a Davey Back fight as well. So at this point, I hope you're at least considering the possibility of all 4 Yonko being there at once, as well as the potential for some of that conflict to be resolved with a Davey Back fight, because from here on out, I'm going to discuss exactly how that competition could look. And if you're worried about how a Davey Back fight would go down since our first one was kinda lame, then make sure you stick around to the end because the possibilities are so much better than you probably think right now. And despite the thumbnail, I don't know if it's actually gonna be a Final Four March Madness Davey Back style tournament. That would seem way too organized for Oda, and especially for these powerful pirates, but maybe that's what happens kind of unofficially. However, that final round, which, spoiler alert, is going to be Straw Hats versus Blackbeard pirates, will definitely be a series of one-on-one fights and not a Davey Back fight. Now, I'm not sure how they're going to determine who fights who in the first round. I mean, maybe they'll just pull straws and let fate decide or something, but whatever the mechanism is, I am sure that it's going to be Straw Hats versus Cross Guild, and then red-haired pirates versus Blackbeard pirates. And so let's go ahead and start with the Straw Hats versus the Cinderella team of the tournament, the Cross Guild. The Cross Guild actually landed some pretty big name free agents, and the owner even sold the whole damn team to the players to make it happen. And the fact that we have already fought most of the Cross Guild, except for Mihawk, is exactly what makes them a prime prospect for a Davey Back fight specifically. I mean, I think there's a very strong possibility that we get even more familiar faces in the Cross Guild before we know it. Potentially Mr. 2, since Croc and Buggy owe him a favor and we need to get him back in the story somehow. And they could get Doflamingo and maybe even Arlong or somebody in the process, potentially. It might depend on how well Suru has been able to wash Doflamingo, since, you know, he's made a string and all. Shout out to Parvision for that one. But let's take a quick detour and discuss how the Davey Back fight even works, so that way we can properly predict potential matchups in a Cross Guild versus Straw Hat Davey Back fight. As we learned from Robin in Long Ring Longland, the competition exists as a way to solve pirate disputes, and it originated on Pirates Paradise Island, aka Hachinosu or Beehive Island, which is the current home base of Blackbeard and was once the home base of Zebek and the Rocks Pirates. It was created by Davy Jones himself, and it consists of 3 rounds. First, you have the donut race, where you paddle a boat around an island, and then the groggy ring, where you have to get the enemy's ball that's attached to their head into the ring, and then of course the famous combat portion. The crews are allowed to decide which members do what events, and in the fight we saw, there were only 7 contestants allowed per team because the Straw Hats only had 7. So I think that we could see this expand to whatever size the crew is at the time, which I think 11 makes sense because that would just be 1 more member, probably Yamato or somebody, and then we would have 5 people in the first game, 5 people in the second game, and then of course 1 person to do the combat portion. The captain of the winning team for each game can then choose to take a crew member from the other team, and at the end they can even take the flag so that they can't be a crew anymore. And this is probably one of the more memorable parts of Long Ring Longland for you, because this also meant that the arc was over.
You should be celebrated. Throw a parade already, whether you win a championship or not. This man was a bona fide scrub.
So what makes the Cross Guild a perfect fit for these types of games? Well, instead of having our crew fight these villains yet again, potentially as a way to show their growth in terms of strength, we will get to see that our crew are all better pirates than these villains. In fact, I think that's what this big Davey Back fight would be all about, showcasing how the Straw Hat crew isn't just strong, but they are also the best pirate crew. These big name villains will get to see that there is a lot more than strength when it comes to being a pirate, and that is what separates Luffy's crew from the rest. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if Luffy lost his round and then had to rely on his crew winning the other 2 for him to still become the king of the pirates. With that in mind, let's go through each of the games and think about the exciting possibilities for this potential matchup. But I first want to stop and ask one more time for you guys to please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. This video took a long time to research, script, record, and edit, so all of your support really goes a long way for me to start pumping out even more content like this. But let's get into these potential Davey Back fight matchups. And I actually want to start with the combat portion, which is the last one that we would see. And of course, Luffy took that position right away when fighting Foxy, and this of course gave birth to Afro Luffy. But would the Cross Guild choose their captain as the combatant as well? Well, if I know Buggy like I think I do, he will do literally whatever he has to avoid that. And the much more likely option is Mihawk, who is probably the brawn of the Cross Guild to begin with. And then this would put Luffy in a bit of a predicament, wouldn't it? Does he want to take the combat portion and fight Mihawk himself? Or is he going to trust his first crew member to take down the world's strongest swordsman for him so that he can move on and still become the Pirate King? And I think there's no doubt that if Luffy had to choose, he wouldn't even hesitate to put his trust in Zoro and let him have that fight instead, like no question. This would set up a big time callback to when Zoro first fought Mihawk, and he told Luffy,
I will never lose again. I will never be defeated. Is that okay? King of the Pirates?
Yep.
And maybe even Luffy will tell him in this moment, "You told me you'd never lose, remember?" Meaning that Luffy's chance to become Pirate King would then ride on Zoro finally besting Mihawk in a one-on-one duel. So then let's talk about the donut race, which is the first challenge. We originally saw Nami, Usopp, and Robin compete in this one and ultimately lose right at the finish line. I believe that this time around we will see this team win their match because of two big reasons: Jinbei and Franky. Last time we did not have a helmsman or a shipwright on the crew at all, and I think that will be why we win the second time around, to show how important it is for pirates to have people who excel at their roles and to show that the Straw Hats have the best helmsman and the best shipwright. But who would be on Buggy's side? Well, that actually is really hard to say at the moment, because I think Croc and Buggy will be used for the second game, and I'll discuss why later. So this will probably be some slew of random people. Like I mentioned earlier, they could maybe get Doflamingo on their side, and I think Doflamingo would be really good at this because he could just use his powers to stop the Straw Hat ship from moving. But I guess we'll have to see. Against the Foxy Pirates, each team got to break down some barrels to create their own rafts for the race, but of course Foxy's team cheated by having both a fish and a fishman on their team to give them an edge. I mean, it's not really cheating, but you know, something like that. So I can see Buggy trying to cheat as well in some way and maybe use whatever fishmen he has on his crew at that point. But during this race, I actually expect them to use their actual ships for the race, because this will give us a chance to see Franky, Jinbei, and Nami work together on the biggest stage possible to showcase why they can sail a ship better than anyone else, or build a ship that is better than anyone's. We saw Usopp use an impact dial just like a Kude burst in the first Davey Back fight, as well as Nami use the whirlpools to her advantage to pick up speed, and I think we will see similar things to these, such as an actual Kude burst, as well as a tag team between Nami and Jinbei to use a whirlpool or a massive wave to their advantage and ultimately win round one. This would be especially meaningful because they lost round one the first time around, so having a shipwright and having a helmsman was the difference and enabled them to now win this one, especially because of how good Franky and Jinbei are at their roles. And then we move on to round two, the groggy ring. The way this works is one person from each team wears a ball on their head, and the goal is to throw that person into the ring, and then you win the game. And we saw Zoro and Sanji work together to win this one versus the Foxy Pirates, and this time around, Zoro is going to be saved for the combat portion, which means that Luffy is going to take his place. The other crew members remaining would be Chopper, Brook, and then potentially Yamato, whoever we end up with as our final crewmate. So that would be this team. And unlike the first time around, I think the Straw Hats will lose this one because of Luffy. This will be kind of an inversion of the lesson we get in round one, which is that Luffy's crew needs to excel at their roles for him to become Pirate King. By him not doing the combat portion, which is where he excels, and needing to use his head a little more in the groggy ring, he's going to put his team at a disadvantage and cause them to lose round two. I think Croc and Buggy are going to play in this round, so it would also be a lesson to Luffy that even though you've beaten these people and you're stronger than them now, probably way stronger than them, that isn't everything there is to being a pirate. You still need to rely on your crew and use your head in certain situations, etc., those kind of things. And I think it would be cool to see Buggy and Croc actually get a win over Luffy, even if it's just a sporting event, and then this loss is also required to create a tie going into round three, thus truly making Zoro's fight necessary for Luffy to accomplish his dream. So it literally set up where Luffy's team had to carry him to a win in this first round so that Luffy can still become the Pirate King. And since Luffy lost his, this could all just be a sobering moment that Luffy does need his crew to accomplish his dream, and he can't do it all alone. I mean, we spent all series seeing him beat these same villains just to eventually lose on the biggest stage. But we have seen so many times throughout the story, his crew always has his back, and that would just be the beauty of the Davey Back fight between these two crews, in my opinion. That piracy is way more than strength, and the Pirate King needs that help around him, and Luffy is the one who has that help. And then let's go ahead and move on to the other side of the bracket, where we would have Shanks versus Blackbeard. And I actually doubt that they would go through a Davey Back fight, but I suppose it's possible. But I'm just going to go ahead and skip those possible events and just talk about a potential fight between Shanks and Blackbeard, because even if they did have a Davey Back fight, we know it would come down to that fight somehow. And this would give us all the exposition we've been waiting for on their history, Shanks' strength, how Blackbeard was able to scar him, etc. I also wouldn't even rule out the possibility that, for one reason or another, Shanks has to fight Blackbeard's entire crew himself. Now, I know that's that sounds crazy, and it definitely is, but that would accomplish a few big things. A, we can see Shanks' true power by holding off an entire Yonko crew himself. B, it gives a reasonable way for Shanks to die if that does indeed happen, given how strong he is. And C, it can also allow for Blackbeard to not be on death's door before fighting Luffy. If he truly fought Shanks 1v1 to the death, he would undoubtedly leave that fight pretty beat up, and if he didn't, that would just be a huge problem, and we're not even going to talk about that possibility. And then of course we would have the penultimate battle that we've been waiting for, Blackbeard Pirates versus Straw Hats. And I think that this would definitely be a series of one-on-one fights that I will probably take a stab at in a separate future video. But the big point that I want to touch on here is Zoro, because he will practically be on death's door himself after fighting Mihawk, and then he'd have to go fight Shiryu. At first, this seemed like a big plot issue to me, until I remembered that Zoro has basically made a living on fighting injured. Whether it be Arlong Park, Saba Odi, or even later on in the raid on Onigashima, Zoro always finds a way to keep going no matter how seriously he gets injured, and seeing him fight an invisible swordsman like Shiryu while being nerfed with serious injuries from Mihawk would be the perfect way to showcase that he truly is the strongest swordsman that the world has to offer. But that's all I had to offer you guys for this video, so please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel so that you guys don't miss any of the exciting content I have coming down the pipeline. And please consider checking out one of these two videos that you should probably already see on the screen. Later.